This is gonna be a video that's pretty serious, and it's something that it's not considered a mental disorder, and sociologists do not study this, and it doesn't actually impact the criminal population, so no one really cares about it. And the only time it's ever been documented by psychologists was when there was a girl who was actually literally abandoned in the middle of the woods, like an actual, like I'm not talking metaphorically, literally. Somebody threw her out there and occasionally would leave food out for her so she'd eat, and she completely lost how to speak or communicate in human language. There's different levels to this. However, for her, literally, she couldn't communicate at all, and they've tried to teach her. So when people actually found out the fact that she was living in the woods, they tried to reintegrate her back into society. They tried to teach her language, they tried to teach her everything. It didn't work, right? Because by that age, she was already well past the point of that critical point in a person's life where they can actually learn that type of information and retain it. So because of it, she could not learn how to reintegrate herself into society. This is a lot worse than the rhesus monkey study that was done by Maslow, I think. For her, she never actually had a chance to be able to be around other people, and I think they called it the feral child. She didn't even have a name. I don't know if they actually know where she came from or who her father was. Again, there was another girl who was locked in her father's basement for 13 years. This was in Austria. And the authorities finally managed to break into his house to find her trapped in his father's basement, in her father's basement, I mean. And with her, same situation as a feral girl, had a hard time getting her to reintegrate back into society, but she was able to actually live in homes and housing for people with severe mental disabilities. She never actually became normal even after years of therapy and attempts at reintegrating her into the general population. I hate talking about this because I hate people who are like that. And it's actually not an interesting area of research. They're boring people. Honestly, they don't really, like, especially with the feral girl, like, she doesn't talk about anything, she doesn't know anything. She knows how to defecate, she knows how to seek food, she knows how to seek shelter, that is it. Her interests do not range outside of that. Like, she has no idea about sophistication culture, linguistics, fictional novels she's read. There's no, like, she doesn't know how to dress herself. She can communicate to animals just barely. I mean, they were the ones that were actually helping her, right? Like, this is kind of like the worst person in the world. But unfortunately, it wasn't because of her own life choices. It was literally because she was abandoned as a child in the middle of the woods. Nowhere. Nobody was around her to help her out with that kind of stuff. Now, I find it a little fishy. I don't think it's a completely honest story, but this is actually the reason why they were studying her was because they were wondering if when a person passes that critical point in their life, can they still learn? Right? Because for infants, like when babies are born, they have, I think, until like 6 months to start crawling. And if they don't crawl by 6 months, then there is enough evidence to say that this child has some sort of developmental delays, which is concerning. Because at that point, it means that that child might actually have problems with posture and walking for the rest of its life, right? And that's something that's not, like, that's kind of hard to cure. I mean, I think medical researchers specifically, are trying to solve that issue through stem cell research. But I don't know how far they've gotten with that. That's another whole topic, but anyway, it's not really another topic. No. I don't want to talk about it because a lot of people don't understand it. Okay, I don't. Yeah. The thing is, with people who actually experienced childhood trauma, right? And this encompasses everything from being the instigator of abuse to being involved in abusive activities, to witnessing abusive activities or abuse, or experiencing abuse firsthand, right? That kind of stuff can cause a person to develop PTSD. Not everybody will, especially people who have gone through childhood sexual abuse, right? And that's people who were taken advantage of sexually as children by people who were a lot older than they are, and they never develop normally after. That's the problem. This is why it's illegal. A lot of people say that when this person gets older, they don't actually do those things. They do. Again, when that kind of stuff happens, other people tend to intervene and prevent that person from being in a situation where they will hurt other people. That's called being responsible. Not everyone's responsible. There's a lot of irresponsible people out there. That's unfortunate, right? It shouldn't have happened, but it happens. And I personally have never gone through childhood sexual abuse, in the sense that nobody's actually physically placed their hands on me. That's the childhood sexual abuse I'm referring to. Not people who are trying to hit on me or attempted to initiate sexual interactions with me. Not those things. Like, controlling for those things, like people who've actually literally been, touched by an angel, so to speak. Yeah. But yeah, that kind of stuff that actually impedes in a person's psychological development. The reason being is that kind of trust between a child and the caregiver has been broken by that interaction occurring. Now, because of that, that's hard to mend to begin with, right? And the sad truth is that actually the caregiver has a lot to do with why that happened, right? A lot of times they were actually instigating said abuse. So this is, again, another huge problem, right? I don't really care about that kind of stuff personally, because those people, I don't even know how they had access to children. There were signs prior to that happening that other people were aware of who didn't intervene, and it's very rarely solely between the caregiver and the child, or the child and its perpetrator to attacked kid, right? It's like getting punched in the face as a kid, except that kind of physical assault doesn't produce the child to be able to understand. Physical violence is something that anyone can experience at any age, and it's something that's not gonna impact someone's perception apart from probably, it might cause somebody to commit crimes. That's it, right? They won't understand, like, why it's not okay to be immoral or violent, right? They won't be able to understand why those things are happening at that point until they get a little older, right? But with sexual abuse, it actually it's not something that a kid can understand, and a lot of people well into their 20s don't understand it either, right? And that's kind of a way to prevent somebody from ever establishing a healthy partner-wise relationship, right? It's not gonna ruin their life per se. Like, they can still walk and talk and whatever, but they're not gonna be able to trust anybody in the context of romantic relationships. And they're not gonna be able to trust their caregivers after that, because it's not something that's supposed to happen. Like, I don't know. How do I say this without, like, being, like, triggering people? Okay, so imagine that, like, I'm supposed to trust the police to apprehend the suspect. If I call them and be like, hello, this guy robbed me, they're not actually supposed to rob me, right? If I call the police and they show up and they rob me and beat me up, right, after I just got robbed, then that's them breaking that trust. I'm never gonna trust the police again. right? And it's gonna cause me to distrust everyone in the environment. Again, that's what happens to people who experience physical abuse. But sexual abuse is kind of similar in the way that it causes the person who's experiencing to never be able to trust that person again. I think the biggest problem with that is that when a person isn't capable of understanding what's happening, right? And you know, like no, I don't think that's a good analogy at all. I was gonna mention something, but okay, maybe it's like if somebody is with a person and that's their mom, and their mom is supposed to make sure that certain stuff doesn't happen ever, right? Like, this is never gonna happen to you during these ages. Now, again, when they get older, they're a lot more resilient, right? Like, it's not gonna affect them when they're no longer children. But when they get to a certain age group, it gets like they're not normal. They'll never be normal. That's 100% guarantee. Right? Like I think Jerry Sandusky was like the one that was in the American media for a very long time. He was a prominent coach for Little League, and he worked at the community center, and a lot of people in the community knew him, and it actually came to light way later that he was molesting a lot of kids in the community center. Now, a lot of people said they didn't know about him doing that, but they also actually suspected that he was also abused as a child, and that caused him to have PTSD, which resurfaced later on as he was volunteering in the community center. Right? He was triggered, and he did that thing again. Because with PTSD, a person who experiences a trauma and it's not normal, right? They want to normalize it so that it's not something that's bad. It's not something only they went through, or it's not something that's it's supposed to happen, or it's not a big deal that it happened. It is. It's not okay that it happened. Now, again, a lot of people who go through stuff that not everybody develops PTSD, but people who do have a hard time understanding why things happened and the fact that they're not at fault for it. And even if they're not, they don't feel like it's fair, right? That kind of stuff happened. So they want that to happen to other people, at least enough people around them that they will understand what they went through and that it becomes normal, right? So they can say what happened was normal. I didn't experience anything bad. Other people have experienced this, which means it's normal now. I didn't go through anything bad. It was okay because other people went through it too. Now, that's not really how people are supposed to go through that kind of stuff, but some people do. With childhood sexual abuse, it actually prevents them from being able to understand why those things aren't okay. I don't know why that is. This has never been discussed or taught in any psych courses I've taken, any philo classes, any materials that I've read. It doesn't even like explain that kind of stuff, and I think it has something to do with the demographics and the people who experience it. And I don't know if it's something that can be prevented. But like, they typically don't end up developing normally because it's like they stop being able to relate to people in a normal way. So they start thinking everyone else that's not family is evil. And they need permission from their families only before they can meet other people. Right? That's what that does. And if they're not authorized by their family members, then they're not allowed to talk to them. And it never even occurs to them that they can talk to other people, that they can seek help from outside resources. And those things are okay. Like this doesn't occur to them, right? And it's like it seems like they're very close, but there's you can tell that they're not actually very close. Like they become isolated. They start receiving treatment from their family members, which is actually only appropriate with their significant other or perhaps other people as normal. And that kind of trauma actually stops people from being able to establish relationships, because once you start trying to talk to them about that kind of stuff, they get triggered, right? They start experiencing the flashbacks. It causes them great anxiety. They don't want to talk about that kind of stuff, or they completely shut it out, right? They block it out. They go through regression. They repress it, right? Repressed memories are real. They just don't want to talk about any of that kind of stuff related to it. And when you actually mention it, because if you think this is a good person, you want to be friends with them, and you actually try to mention this to them, they won't talk about it, and they'll just completely ignore you. And from that point on, you won't be friends with that person anymore because of the fact that you tried to mention a huge problem, right? Now, I'm not saying everybody who experiences this is going to end up like that or is like that, but it's very difficult to treat, especially since that it gets to be abusive to tell a person to cut out their family members. That's cutting out all your resources. Like, that's like everyone needs to rely on certain people in order to get by in life, and to cut out people's resources is incredibly hard for a person to get by on, right? It's like you can't depend on anyone. You have to make all new social contact. That's a lot of work, and especially if you're already struggling with a mental health crisis such as PTSD, that's gonna be near impossible, right? You're gonna need a lot of like social supports, or you're gonna have to be working with your doctor consistently, taking a lot of medications, seeing your therapist, on top of seeing group therapy, on top of trying to get yourself back out there and relearning proper and appropriate behavior and emotional responses, right? That's like something that people sometimes they don't even recognize that they need to do those things. Why do therapists and psychologists not talk about it or go through it or treat these people? They don't have the legal authority to force them into therapy. And yet they're usually physically assaulted by their clients when they start talking about that kind of stuff. Like, that's the trigger part. So when they start talking about anything like that, they actually lash out violently. And they don't want to talk about anything like that. They don't like having those things brought up, and it's impossible for them to even open up to a therapist. In the case they do, they will lash out, and in the case that they do lash out, the therapist can no longer continue the session with them, right? And in the case that happens and they have to see another therapist, it's gonna take the same amount of time for them to be able to trust that therapist again, and then go through the same procedure and get cut from the therapist again when they lash out violently. And in the case that they actually have a caseworker or a police officer present during their therapy sessions, they're never going to open up to them, right? Because it's not something like, it just creates an environment of mistrust, right? This is a therapist saying, like, I don't actually trust you to be able to handle yourself. I'm treating you like an infant. And it just causes a lot of like repressed memories, because they're like, oh, I remember when I was an infant, when I was a kid, when I was treated like this. And then it links back to that memory, and yeah, it just doesn't go anywhere. So, why? I know it seems like a big deal, but it's actually not, and they're a huge pain in the ass. That's it. That's why they don't like to treat them, and no, they're always not the most wealthy clients. Yeah, they're cheap. So, like, not all cheap people have gone through childhood sexual abuse, but yeah, those people are cheap. They offer very little value to, like, as just in a personal life, and it's just so much work. It's like, hey, do you really like the old Game Boy Advance? Well, I got a broken one. You can fix it up and use it if you like. But I'm like, why would I do that if I can just play on the Nintendo Switch? Or even the Window Wii, that would be a better option than playing on the Game Boy Advance that doesn't even light up anymore. I have to play in broad daylight. Like, yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, but that's what that's like, and I hate them. Me personally. They're the most racist, intolerant, and they excuse everything as, oh, this happened when I was a kid. It's like a constant chip on their shoulder, and it's like, oh my god, can you just like not? Like, yeah, I get that happened, but I'm sorry, are you literally dying? Like, are you being refused services or something? Or are you refusing other people's services and putting other people's lives at risk? Like, it's just... Yeah. But that's what that is. It's not okay. You shouldn't be doing that. But honestly, the only people that it actually affects are very, very low income, poverty-stricken parts of the world. Just the poorest people in the entire world who weren't even supposed to have kids anyway. And no, it doesn't look good on volunteering for them or like giving them your time or like trying to help them out. They always have these like schemes of like stealing and like riddled with like hatred and like abuse and like delusions, and it's just like, oh my god. Maybe we can like, explore those frustrations at another day, but it's just kind of hard to talk to them about anything. Like, everything triggers them. Everything is somebody else's fault, and it's just never something they can get over. Me as a functional adult, I don't like people like that. Because I shouldn't have to baby somebody who is capable of doing it themselves and then, like, get them to, like, think that we're friends where they'll be excessively dependent on me and like teach them every little thing from how to be an adult. I don't think that's my place. That's what their parents were supposed to do, right? And it's not okay for me to substitute myself as their parent. That's not okay. So that's why you know what I mean? I was like, not that they can't get better and they can't move on with their lives. Obviously they can, and I'm not saying they're choosing not to, because some of them actually are going through PTSD. But I just, as a layperson, like the general population, I don't know what to do about that kind of stuff, right? And it's unfortunate, I think, that kind of stuff happens. Yeah, I mean, it sucks not to be able to trust anybody or establish some sort of like relationship or like understanding what's appropriate given a relationship versus what's not, right? Like, is it okay for me and a colleague to do this? Is it okay for me and my classmate to do this? Is it okay for me and my roommate to do this? Is it okay for me and my neighbor to do this? Right? Like, as neighbor, is this neighborly? Is this work related? Is this what friends do? That kind of stuff. Like, people don't have to think too hard on that kind of stuff. I mean, some people do, but those are people with lower social skills. I mean, you can always improve that. But yeah. On a happier note, I don't know what to think about these things that are happening to me. I feel like I'm not normal for being a virgin so late. I feel like the movie 40-Year-Old Virgin was about me, honestly. Like, that's how I feel right now, and I'm like, oh my god, like, I'm not going by like the Christian value of like chastity and virginity and maidenhood and like, oh, if you're not a virgin when you get married, then like you're just a slut and a whore and your marriage is gonna fail. That's so funny. Can you imagine like during a wedding and there's like some crazy old woman and she's like, your marriage is gonna fail, you slut. And then you're like, what the fuck? That's funny. But yeah, Anyway, with the term slut, I mean, it's thrown around everywhere. If you like having sex and you are not impeding or violating any sort of rules or interfering with other people's lives by doing so, then by all means, no one's really telling you how to go about establishing and using social connections, right? Just if it's consensual and both people are enjoying it, then why not? I personally wouldn't because I care about myself. Just kidding. I don't agree with the slut walk. I don't think people should be slutty. I just don't think that's a good thing. And people know that's not a good thing. But then Amber Rose, it's just some social media influencer, and she's been like trying to promote this by slut walk and stuff. And I get where she's coming from. Like, there's people who've made some choices in their life that may not be the most admirable, right? And she's trying to say it's fine, like you can still like be proud of who you are despite what you've done and the choices you've made, and I totally commend her for that. But I think it's giving off the wrong message for some people who don't really understand why she's doing those things. Yeah, but yeah, I feel like I'm like a little behind on that kind of stuff with the like human relationship and boyfriends and girlfriends and marriage and stuff. My dream was to marry the guy that I met and I really liked, but some people don't do that, and it's fine that they don't. Am I still a slut for having 5 boyfriends? Even though like I don't cheat, but I've had 5 boyfriends before I got married. What if I had 10 boyfriends? Am I still a slut? Even though they only lasted a week and they were real relationships, it's just stuff happened. Am I? I don't know. No one would answer me on this. Do I need to be in a relationship to be happy and fulfilled? No, absolutely not. That's not a requirement. Is there something wrong with me if I'm not in a relationship? Absolutely not. Should I still find a person to be in a relationship with? I don't know. I feel like it's an experience that I should go through once in my life. And I'm like ready to put myself out there. So like some guy can be like trying to convince me to marry him. I think that's how that works, right? Like the guy's supposed to convince a girl, you should marry me and go out with me, and these are the reasons why. And the girl's supposed to be like, look at me, I'm really pretty. Do you want to take me out? Ironically, it's not going to be out of the gym pool. It's like, oh, do you want to make babies with me? Or some guy's going to be like, oh, I want to make babies with her. How am I going to convince her to let her put my dick inside her and like splooge all over her? What should I do? Can I just do that? No, that's a crime. If you just do it and she doesn't even get a say in doing so, that's a crime. Yes, because she's gonna be very mad. And you won't be able to do that again. Not that you'd want to, I guess. I have no idea. I'm trying to think about the whole context of romantic and sexual relationships, and I don't get it. That's the one thing that I don't understand, and I think it has to be explained to me, to somebody. I haven't actually witnessed it myself, because every time I'm around other people, usually they're single, except for this one girl who had a boyfriend. But she was like single, honestly. She was single, but like she had a boyfriend. Like it's just she's very single acting. But then she had like a boyfriend, and her boyfriend was very single acting too. They weren't hooking up, I think. I have no idea. I don't know what the relationship was. Like, they always hung out together, but like, he'd always tell me, don't tell Racine that we were talking or hanging out. And I'm like, what the fuck is your problem, dude? You act like we're not even friends. Like, the fuck? And then Racine's like, oh my god, like, well, I don't even remember what she said half the time. I think she was like checking out other guys and blaming it on some guy that claimed to be gay. And she's like, yeah, it was him who's doing that. And I was like, Are you sure? What the hell's going on with you two? Why are you even together? What was binding the two of you to be together? It's kind of weird. To me, I'm like, kind of don't trust it. Also wondering about the whole like monogamous versus polygamous relationships. So monogamy is when it's a single partner relationship, so one person's with another person, and polygamy is multiple partner relationships at the same time. So a person can have like 4 partners at the same time, and everyone's okay with that. I still don't get it. I mean, I learned about this in philosophy class, and from what one professor wrote, they wrote an essay on it. They said that the reason why it's not talked about often is because it's socially unacceptable. So a lot of people choose not to engage in those type of social activities. And another wrote that a lot of people have a hard time establishing healthy monogamous relationships, before they even talk about another relationship, right? From her experience, a lot of people had like trust issues, abandonment issues, just to put it lightly. A lot of people didn't understand what to expect from a relationship according to the person that they're with, like based on the person that they're with, right? Like, I don't know, like even if my husband was an accountant, I wouldn't want him to do my taxes, that kind of stuff. And if you couldn't respect that, then that's probably not the best person to go near, right? That's what I'm thinking. Like maybe that's a bad person to marry. You know what? If he's an actual professional, then he wouldn't care. Like, he shouldn't care about how I do my finances because it's separate from his finances. It's completely inappropriate. Oh my god, some people are like that. They actually can't do anything without consulting their significant other about purchases. When I was volunteering at an old folks home, there was this woman who said that she actually, like, her husband wanted to purchase a TV, and it was one of those like new flat screen TVs, and she made him pay her back for her purchasing a TV for their home. I thought that was really weird. I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's right. I don't think he needs to pay you back for that. I mean, if you need a new flat screen for your house, then you should be okay with buying something for your husband if you can afford it. Act like you guys are divorced and just living in the same house. Oh my god, is that what that was? That's illegal. Ew. Yeah, anyways, there's just so many illegal things going on around me. What is going on? Can I get a good template to go off of? According to the marriage book that I read, there's actually not a lot of good marriages out there, and it's pretty much a gamble. I don't know if that's true. But according to him, that is. Him and 3 other PhDs worked on a book together. Or 2 other PhDs. Yeah, him and 2 other PhDs worked on the book together and said, you know what? We can actually, to a certain degree of accuracy, know when a couple's about to divorce. And I'm like, so how do I keep a good relationship? He's like, don't do those things. And I'm like, but remember, that's not going to guarantee a good marriage. And I'm like, how is this book helpful? And they're like, also, we only had a handful of good marriages to learn from. And I'm like, they never even mentioned their parents' marriages at all. That's kind of weird. Yeah, what's a boyfriend? I have to have sex with him before he's my boyfriend, right? But what if I have sex with him and we're married and we just didn't sign the papers yet? That would mean that we can't leave each other's lives without changing our lives forever. Right? Huh. He must be a really person that I like a lot then. I guess. That's so weird. So, like, if I get a boyfriend and, like, what's the difference between if he's my husband? For a lot of people, they use the terms interchangeably, but it's important to distinguish the difference. So, I think boyfriend is wrong. You're not supposed to have a boyfriend. It's probably why it was so frowned upon for such a long time. And during the modern times, people were more accepting of it. And a lot of people who were boyfriend and girlfriend ended up being married to each other after some time. And that's okay too, according to modern society. I don't know. I'm going off of what I'm seeing. I've never experienced it, so I mean the reason is that like I've actually like never liked somebody enough to like be like, oh, I trust you completely. Yo, not only do I trust you completely, I like you, like, you know, sexually. Oh, not only do I like you sexually, but I'm actually planning my life where you are a very big part of it. In fact, my life is gonna be integrated with your life. You're now a motherboard with the graphic cards integrated, cannot be separated. You know, you are now like you are the my other shoe to my other shoe. I guess like without you things wouldn't be the same. But I could say that to anybody. That's why I don't get it. What if I like date somebody and he decides to marry me? Wait, do I marry him? Which way is it? Is it a cultural difference? It might have something to do with that. Maybe different cultures have different protocols surrounding romantic relationships, including marriage. Yeah. So maybe that's why like a lot of people don't do interracial marriages because they're from different cultures. And it's hard to like integrate it into different culture, especially if it's like I don't know if that's true. I just feel like that's what people say. I've been trying to Google this. The answer is you'll just know when you meet the right guy. Thanks. That's my face when people tell me stuff like that. If it's a cultural thing, then how would that affect anything? Can somebody explain this to me? I feel like apparently it's like something people can't tell me. Parents have to tell me. Or maybe I'll just know it by looking at my parents and be like, oh, do I have to do that way you guys did it? Because I don't want to. I don't get it.